I could drink, I'd be drunk for this.
Alright everyone, hello and welcome to a new episode of the Screenplay Archaeology podcast. I'm your host KiramidHead.
And I'm EpicCandle, and if I could drink, I'd be drunk for this.
Oh yeah, she has been super pissed ever since I attached this one to a Discord message. Way more than I was actually expecting, and this is coming from someone who doesn't even like this script. But today we're covering Uncharted. It's the adaptation of the Sony video game series, the big PlayStation 3 and 4 exclusive. And this is the one that came out because of the Sony hack, so thank you North Korea for some episode fodder. Before we jump into that, I'm just going to get my usual plugs out of the way. If you like this show and you want to listen to something with a similar subject matter, check out the Shelf Film podcast, also the Table Reads podcast. The links will be down below, but you can search for those pretty much anywhere and you'll run into them. And also we got social media pages and Facebook, Tumblr, and Twitter, and also we got a blogger page, and we're on iTunes. We're now on Spotify. We're on Stitcher Radio. I'm still waiting for Google to get off their ass and review my application for Google Play, and Pandora is just going to get back to me at some point after even going to accept me, so yay. There's not even anything I can check, so yeah, I might be on those platforms in the future, but I'm definitely on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify right about now. And I would plug the Bonfire t-shirt campaigns, but I don't know if those are still going to be up by the time this episode airs. So yeah, I'm going to leave those out for the time being. But to get into the episode, like I said, this is an adaptation of the Uncharted games. It's a loose adaptation of the first game, and that's Nathan Drake looking for El Dorado, which of course is a golden statue in this version. And the supporting cast is mostly the same. The bad guys are mostly the same. It's basically getting to it before the bad guys can.
Still the standard fare in these sort of movies.
Yeah, in these Indiana Jones wannabe kind of movies, although this kind of tonally doesn't go for that.
No, I mean, it sort of tries to establish itself as something different, but it kind of falls flat a lot. Yeah,
because it very much wants to be a grittier kind of action thriller, but still does some kind of silly stuff in it, so, whatever is the point.
It's a weird one.
So, if we want to start talking about the four main games briefly, I'm not counting PSP or Vita games in this, because does anybody really?
Yeah, I mean, I have it on Vita, but I couldn't finish it because my hand started cramping when I tried to. So
yeah, my understanding is that the Vita especially is bad for that.
Yeah, it takes some getting used to, and I was not used to it. But anyway, Uncharted 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yes, now, Uncharted 1 is a good game. It's got a good story, but I think it's a good starting point, but I do think it has a few problems, namely it's not paced very well. It's just shootout, and then the game is over.
It's sort of, it's trying to reach for something, but it's not sure what to reach for. So it's establishing something, but it's not clear what it's establishing exactly.
Yes, basically, the later games refined the gameplay formula down very well, and they got the balance and the pacing. And it's the sequels which added in those sort of cinematic set pieces which the game became known for.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the rare game series, and I know someone's going to think differently, but I think with the Uncharted series, I don't think there's any sort of sequel game that straight out sucks.
No, none of them do. I mean, some are better than others. I mean, but no, the first game's actually really solid. It's a good introduction to what it's trying to do. It's got some fairly decent gameplay aside from the pacing, aside from those really awful six-axis grenade controls, but I believe they fixed that for the remastered version on the PS4, thankfully. And there's a few annoying bits, like the bit where you have to go upriver on the jet ski.
Yeah, it's a good prologue, I think.
But yeah, and it's got a fairly interesting twist on the whole El Dorado mythology, which we'll talk about in more detail as we go into the actual script, because that adapts that kind of.
Yeah, and I'm probably gonna mention Tomb Raider. That one movie.
Oh, yeah, it totally rips off the twist from the end of the first Uncharted game.
Yeah, totally.
But now that one was good. Uncharted 2, Among Thieves was a vast improvement in pretty much every department. It did a lot of the same things. Like it had another supernatural-ish kind of element to it. And it was built around kind of like Shangri-La and all that stuff, but it was overall just a much better game. It was paced a lot better, and it was just really, really good.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah, I think 2 is probably my favorite of the 4.
My favorite would be 4, because that's the one I've sunk most hours into.
Yeah, 4 is really good too.
Yeah, and then there's the spin-off, but that's not part of this one because it's a spin-off.
Yeah, we're not going into spin-offs here.
Yeah.
It would be like if I ever did that Super Mario episode and suddenly I have to start talking about all the fucking like race, like all like the Mario Karts and like the Paper Marios. Like, nope.
Too much.
It would be like if in the Silent Hill episode, if we took an extra 20 minutes to talk about Silent Hill the arcade. No one wants to listen to me talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
I've never even played Silent Hill the arcade.
I'd be surprised if you could fill 20 minutes with it.
Yeah, I'm not a good arcade shooter. But then in 2011 you get Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception, which it's not bad, but it's definitely, I think, the most flawed of the 4 in a lot of ways.
It sort of gets bogged down with being the vessel for, I don't know, lore, background information.
A little bit. Like, and it like starts retconning the shit out of a bunch of things, like Francis Drake was involved in 2 treasures, and Nate's been chasing down both of them his whole life, even though he never mentioned the second one in the first game, and he needs the ring for the astrolabe thing, and then but he never mentioned that, and he was going to leave the ring behind on the island and all that stuff. That's like, eh.
Yeah, but they do keep up with the team of retcon in 4.
Oh, yeah, they do.
Oh, we had Sam.
Yeah, but I think they handled it a little bit more gracefully there, whereas in this one it's just kind of like, 3 very much feels like they said, okay, we want a scene here, and a scene here. Let's just tie it all together in the most haphazard way we possibly can, but it's still very fun.
Yeah, it's not a bad game, it's just not as strong as the others.
And it has just like a few annoying things in it, like those 7-foot-tall mercenaries who you're constantly fighting in every area, whom you have to melee fight. And the whole... There's always a part in every game where you're running towards the camera and you can't see where you're jumping, but 3 has the worst one when you're in that ship that's sinking and you're having to run from the water and you're given like a split second to make a jump and you can't see where you're jumping to. That was awful.
Yeah, it was. Kinda. Trial and error.
Oh yeah, very much so. But in a lot of ways it did kind of refine the gameplay formula, because it did a number of really good things in that, like in one which they should have carried over to 4, which was being able to throw grenades back.
Oh, okay, that was in 3. I forgot.
Yeah, that's in 3, but it doesn't come back in 4.
Okay, I was wondering.
But I mean, there's some good stuff in there, and like I remember the burning house in France was actually a pretty good starting set piece for the game.
They do like to start most of the games with a bang, really, because literally in the case of 1, because there's the firefight immediately after, but still.
Yeah, then that's the boat chase, right?
Yeah, that one.
Or more like you stand still on a boat while a bunch of boats go around you in circles.
Yeah, pretty much the standard pirate mode of conduct, I don't know.
And you're like shooting barrels and stuff, I think.
Yeah, pretty much it's the shooting tutorial, so...
Yeah, pretty much. And then there was a pretty lengthy gap between games after 3. I've never really looked into why that was, or maybe it's because Naughty Dog was just busy working on Last of Us in that time.
Could be, because I don't think I've ever actually looked into it myself either, but I do remember that Last of Us took quite a bit in the meantime. And
I do know that like the game changed direction pretty drastically, because the Last of Us team took over Uncharted 4, I think.
Possible. I haven't looked into it that much.
Yeah, and I think they did, and it was probably a good move because it kind of needed a little bit of an injection after, you had a shot in the arm after 3 to sort of like shake it up, and it was a very good game.
Yeah, it was.
And it was a solid ending. If they'll leave it alone and let it be the ending of the series, it was a solid ending to that.
True.
And it was actually really good. It was interesting in the sense that I kept expecting there to be like the big pseudo-supernatural element that the other 3 games had, and it just never happened in the game.
I think that was kind of refreshing, actually, because for the first 3 it was like maybe magic, maybe mundane, okay, it's a little bit magic, but then in 4 there's just no magic.
Yeah, it was a nice change of pace, especially after 3 where you had the weird thing where it's like, okay, is this guy a djinn or is he not? And then they never actually bothered to explain it in the actual game, like you had to look up interviews later.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, he just had a friggin' bulletproof vest, and apparently he just can teleport.
Apparently, because that's a thing people can just do.
I guess he's Batman.
Quite possible.
And no. Oh, there have been evil Batmen.
Oh no.
No, we're not going down that rabbit hole.
Nope.
It was first announced in 2008. Right after, basically not long after the first game came out in 2007.
Okay.
And eventually and the first writers who were attached were Thomas Dean Donnelly and Joshua Oppenheimer, who are sort of the go-to, let's write the first draft of like an action-adventure movie guys. Like, they wrote that movie Sahara with Matthew McConaughey, and they also wrote the earlier drafts of that crappy Conan reboot, and I've read 2 of them, and they were really bad. And they were the first guys Marvel went to for Doctor Strange, but their draft went unused.
Okay.
And I don't have that one to read. Maybe, kind of. There's a whole thing there. But, they were attached, and then eventually it was 2010, it was announced that David O. Russell, he of Three Kings and The Fighter and other movies, was attached to write and direct. And this is the one where there was like these weird, like, pseudo rumors about it being about a family of art thieves or something like that, which I don't think anyone ever officially confirmed that, but it was one of those things you were hearing a lot about at the time.
Okay, that sounds like something else entirely. 'Cause, I don't know, it doesn't sound like Uncharted.
No, it doesn't, but who knows if that was even the real thing. But Russell was wanting Mark Wahlberg to star in it, and I like Mark Wahlberg as an actor. I'm just afraid if he would play Nathan Drake, it would be very Happening Wahlberg by mistake almost. Like, hey guys, where'd El Dorado go?
Yeah, that's the thing I'm worried about, so that's an automatic no from me. No!
And he has a quote where he's saying, I'm obviously in whatever David wants to do, but the idea of it is so off the charts. De Niro being my father, Pesci being my uncle. It's not going to be the watered down version, that's for sure. So who knows what that's about.
Sounds like a mess.
Yeah, it does. And eventually in 2011, Russell dropped out, and a director who's Neil Berger, who did, I believe he did The Illusionist with Edward Norton. Let me look up his filmography real quick on my phone here. Yeah, he did The Illusionist and Limitless with Bradley Cooper. He's done some other stuff since then. But he got the job, and let me get back to the other page. No. Okay, this is just pissing me off. There we go. Apparently the producers, they sparked to whatever his take was, and there's a quote from him, and this is going to be kind of long. We're rewriting the script from scratch. I'm just jumping into that literally right now, about to close the deal and leap off. Until the screenplay is written, you never know who's going to be acting in it or not. That depends on who's starring in it, because, if the deal's struck, you already know. But there are a lot of good actors out there who even look like Nathan Drake and who could do it. I love the project. I think it's a great adventure, and it's a wild, insane ride. The game is, and the movie will be. I mean, it has pretty great character at its core. Nathan's a bit of a con man, a hustler, knows his stuff, ballsy. It's great. Absolutely. And then you have to do what a movie does best as well, build on what's cool about the game and then make it into a movie. Yeah, there will be balance in this one. This one is a very great adventure. It's just a matter of pulling out the very cool, intense stuff that works for the film story and making sure the story supports those elements and also makes us really connected to the character. So basically, I just read a whole lot of fluff.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's not like Nathan Drake would be hard, because he's sort of generic in a sense because he's a white dude with brown hair. So it's like...
Well, I mean, in video game land, that's everybody.
Yeah, pretty much everybody.
Especially that 2008 to 2013 kind of era.
About that time, yeah.
It was the Call of Duty era.
The shooty bang era.
Yes, the shooty bang era. But then in 2012, Berger dropped out to work on, I believe it was Divergent, which is like, wow. And, wow, way to move on to crap. And in the studio, they then hired Marianne and Cormac Wibberley to rewrite the film. Now, they're known for working on the National Treasure movies, which is going to be really funny coming up in a minute.
Oh boy.
But also, as mentioned in an interview, Seth Rogen was apparently approached to write the film multiple times, but turned it down every single time. And in early 2014, Seth Gordon, the director of Horrible Bosses, was signed on to direct, with the latest script being written by David Guggenheim. So that brings us up to our script, because we're covering the Guggenheim draft.
Looks like the edit date would be in 2014.
Yes, it's July 2014 is when the script is dated. And let me get over to my notes. Yes, it's Uncharted by David Guggenheim, and it lists a bunch of those writers as previous drafts that we just talked about. And it's dated July 25th, 2014. And this is the version that came out because of the Sony hack, and there was a bunch of emails about it that came out because of that. So once again, thank you, North Korea, for making this episode possible. Brought to us by viewers like you.
A bit of an unexpected source, but okay.
Yep. But so to jump into this version, and I'll pull up the article about the leaked emails for when it's relevant. But yeah, let's just jump into it.
And we open up with a brief flashback, sort of.
Sort of.
Flash forward, followed by a flashback, and then we're back to present.
Yeah, it starts off with him. It starts off with Nathan Drake. He's unconscious inside what we later, in like a page, find out is a crashed plane. And it's like cutting between him there and like the stuff he's doing there and like this flashback to his past. And he's in the crash plane. He's unconscious. He's dreaming about himself at 9 years old in 1989 with his parents. First red flag. Archaeologists Peter and Lenny Drake, and they're at this church in Brazil where a landslide exposed a mass grave of soldiers wearing Sir Francis Drake's coat of arms who looked like they were buried alive. And Peter explains that Drake's men, they were sent out with a special token that would point in the direction he went in, and they decided to go looking for it. And apparently all these guys, all these men he just sent out to random places with one of these tokens, and they all disappeared.
Strategic genius.
Yes, and it just gets sillier as it goes on too. But eventually they find a ring with an inscription on it, which is Drake's motto, inside one of the corpse's mouths. And Peter, plays around with the ring. He rotates it, and like these bits pop out of it, showing that it must be used with a larger mechanism.
I mean, yeah, those are actually a thing. I think I've seen one of those rings that sort of pop out into a small astrolabe or something, but I think this is a bit different. It
reminds me more of the necklace from Underworld 2.
Let's not talk about those.
Yeah, let's not talk about Underworld 2. And so, Nate, he's in the plane, regaining consciousness in the present day, and he has one more flashback to, they're in the hotel in Brazil, and his parents, they wake him up in the middle of the night, and his mother gives him the ring now on the necklace, and they have him hide under the bed, where he witnesses a man with Peruvian tribal markings tattooed on his forearms he sees them murder his parents when they won't tell him where the ring is. And in the present day, we see that the plane is perched precariously on top of the Puncak Jaya mountain range in Indonesia, and Nate has a piece of it lodged in his thigh.
Like you do.
Yeah, and he pretty easily shakes that off, too.
I think we're going to get to as to why in a few moments when we hear more about his background for this particular movie, but yeah.
But yeah, can we just talk about the fact that, okay, he doesn't have parents really that are all that significant in the games.
No, well, one is a bit more significant, but not enough to actually have, a fate.
But before this, when this was written, as far as Uncharted 3 went, he might as well have not had a family.
Yeah, as far as we knew, he was an orphan.
So yeah, they're bullshitting here and giving him this generic, oh my, like that Batman image, my parents are dead! Smack!
Pretty much the only reason why they're here.
Yeah, and it's just crap, really.
They could have done better, but, I mean, here we are.
And so, like, he gets the piece of the plane out of his thigh, ties off a tourniquet, and so there's a helicopter carrying 4 mercenaries approaches, and by the way, we never find out who these guys are.
Because why would we need that information?
These guys never chase him down or anything.
Maybe they had a punch clock to get to, I don't know.
Yeah. The helicopter approaches, and Nate heads to the cockpit only for his accomplice Tariq to regain consciousness as well and pull a gun on him, wanting the statues that are in Nate's backpack. It's like these Chinese jade idols or something.
Yeah, and I mean, that's pretty standard up to this far, because not a lot of his friends actually, stick by him. Because usually they end up backstabbing him some way or another.
Oh, yeah, true. And so they have a brief standoff, and they shoot at each other, and Tariq's bullet grazes Nate's head, but he manages to shoot Tariq dead, so yeah, he's like, God damn it, Tariq, I don't want to do that. So we have no idea who this guy is, but we get that reaction.
And thus we have no idea why we would have to care about him.
Yeah, exactly. And so the 4 mercenaries finally disembark from the helicopter and approach the plane, and they're also after the statues. And Nate shoots 2 of them from the plane and heads for the cockpit, as the remaining 2 mercs board from the rear. And he does this crazy thing where he retracts the rear landing gear, and it sends the plane sliding down the mountainside, causing 2 mercs to go flying. One knocks himself out on the wall, and the other slams into Nate, and they have a bit of a fight. And Nate manages to get away from him, runs up the back of the planes and slides towards a fatal drop. He runs out the back and plants a fire axe into the cliffside just as the plane falls. So this is kind of a Uncharted-ish action scene.
It is. It does remind me a bit of at least the train sequence in 2, I think it was. A little bit. Yeah.
It's the most Uncharted the script ever gets, really.
Yeah, which is a shame because we're like 8 pages in and that's about it.
And then, however, the guy he was fighting with managed to grab onto his backpack, and Nate is forced to let the pack, along with the statues, fall with him. So he just takes it off, lets the guy drop.
Such a nice guy.
And what's really funny about this is that this is a pretty big and ridiculous kind of action sequence, right?
Yeah, pretty ridiculous more than anything else.
Yeah, you read out these emails. And they're talking about how, like, this is the gritty, more adult version of like, more so than National Treasure, and it's like, this is sillier than anything in National Treasure.
Yeah, this is, I wouldn't call it adult or gritty in any stretches of the term, because this is sort of like a Saturday morning cartoon sort of bit in Johnny Quest or something.
Just more violent.
Yeah, a bit more violent, a bit more blood, but that's about it.
And it's really funny is that this next sequence is very National Treasure as well. Because it cuts to the Louvre, where there's a gala being held, and museum employee Atak Navarro introduces their generous benefactor Gabriel Roman, who gives a speech intercut with a team of men preparing to break into the sewers, and they pull up in a van, open a hatch on the bottom, and they're over a manhole, and they go into the manhole, and they're waiting to blow through the wall, basically, to get into the museum. Now, that is almost exactly what happens in National Treasure, where the Sean Bean's guys go to get the Declaration. They pull over a storm drain, and they go in that way.
I don't know, it feels like it's a mix of Notice Me, National Treasure Senpai, and, like, I don't know, Ocean's 11.
A little bit. But, Roman sets up a video presentation during which he sneaks out and he takes out the cameras, allowing the team to break in. It reveals them to be under his employ, and there's this bit where he goes to meet them, and he goes to like a ventilation shaft, and he turns his jacket inside out, and it's got a plastic lining, and he shoots a grappling gun like he's Batman, and the plastic lining like lets him go just zip down the vent.
I don't get it. If he has the money to hire a bunch of professionals to nick something from a museum, why would he take part in it instead of establishing an alibi or something? Like, I know the video is there to be the distraction, but still.
And better yet, if he has museum employees working for him, which we know that from a few minutes later, why isn't he just taking advantage of that and getting it just snuck out without even risking hiring people to go in and get it?
Yeah, I mean, not unusual for a museum to have, like, actual fakes hanging out to the public to see, and the actual legit artworks are inside a vault somewhere deep. So, there are other ways to get this. It doesn't have to be this.
You say that, but that actually is a plot point later on in this thing.
I forgot. Anyway, let's continue.
He helps them steal a ceremonial vase from the South American wing. And there's actually a scene, he's like, you think they'll notice this is missing? It's like, nah, they won't notice. Yeah, sure, the Louvre won't notice that one of their artifacts is missing.
Yeah, because they're sort of, I don't know, I mean, okay, they did lose the Mona Lisa for a very long time. But
they noticed.
I think, yeah, they noticed eventually, and I think they've beefed up security somewhat since then.
Funny, this is like the second script in recording wise in a row where which involved a heist at the Louvre. I just thought of that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been at the Louvre. It's more like a shopping mall than a museum at this point, but okay.
Okay, so cuts to his estate where Navarro is revealed to be in his employ as well. And Navarro in the game is basically Roman's evil henchman. He's like a mercenary guy there, but they made him like the genius sidekick here.
I mean, it's so weird, like, I'm not entirely sure why. I mean, I know because I read the script, I know why they're doing it, but it's a weird thing because Navarro was a very effective dragon to Roman. I mean, he didn't have to get a sort of character change in that way.
Yeah, here he's the evil nerdy guy until he's not.
Until he's not, yeah.
Which it's just like a light switch, like chung, but we'll get there.
In good time, unfortunately.
Okay, and this is where it gets weird, because Navarro mixes a special chemical to dissolve an adhesive on the bottom of the vase, revealing 3 metal pieces, which they use to complete Francis Drake's astrolabe, so they're bringing in that plot device from Uncharted 3. And why this was attached to the bottom of an Incan ceremonial vase, I don't know. Did like one of Drake's guys decide he was going to do a massively overcomplicated version of hiding your house key under a flower pot?
I have no idea, and I wish it would have been explained somewhere, somehow, like a throwaway line somewhere. I don't know, just something more than this.
I'm like, what fucking good is Drake's astrolabe gonna do him if it's split up into a million pieces all over the world?
It's like they could have said something like they found a diary or a coded letter from an underling who said that they've done as Drake asked and broken it to pieces and hidden them all over the world. That would be a thing. We could clear it up with that, but there's nothing.
I mean, that's less an Uncharted puzzle and more like a Silent Hill puzzle.
Yeah, but still.
Like, that's
it
right
would
up.
at least be an explanation.
Yeah, that's right up there with melting the fucking wax doll and using it to open a door.
Point and click adventure games. Woo!
Yeah, but there's still a piece missing, and Navarro's like, we need him. Dun dun dun.
Yeah, and we are back to Indonesia.
Yep, it cuts to Batam, Indonesia, and it's like, and the scene descriptions of this place is it's like this lawless, Wild West kind of area, and I'm like, this guy has been reading way too many like current day crime articles or something.
Yeah, it's basically their version of Roanapur from Black Lagoon, if anyone remembers the series. It's like wretched hive-esque common villainy spread over an entire city.
Yeah, basically. It's modern-day Tortuga, the way it's described.
Yeah.
But it just feels like the guy writing this, David Guggenheim, just went, I read all these articles and stuff, and I'm going to put all that information here, because this is going to be current and real feeling, damn it.
And he did not do a good job with it.
Because he keeps doing that. Like, he keeps, like, mentioning details and stuff, and I'm like, and all these, like, locations and agencies and stuff, and it's like, you're trying way too hard to make this into, like, a modern action thriller.
Well, he tries, but right now it's just a mess. A complete mess.
And so Nate goes back to his home base, which is in an abandoned building, which for some reason he has to access through the back door of a liquor store.
I'm sure that's an actual thing somewhere. Maybe.
Is that for him, or does he put the liquor store there just for Sully?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. He can't exactly have that much booze in his own apartment, he might as well open the store.
But no, so so he goes back there and he performs surgery on his leg, and he apparently went fucking hours from that mountain range back to his home to do self-surgery, so he's losing that leg.
Yeah, it's gone. It's dead. Needs to be chopped off.
Yep, and he takes a shower, for the ladies in the audience.
Yeah, because obviously that's the only thing that would get a girl to sit through this thing. Some beefcake.
Man, it would be a hard time getting a guy to sit through this thing.
Yeah.
He takes a shower and it reveals that he has military tattoos, which that's hinting at a backstory we get later.
And I'm going to rage.
Oh yes, you will. More than I thought you would. But so, this is when Sully shows up and he tells him that Roman is looking for him and offering money. And, okay, we gotta talk about Sully in this script because, A, he's barely in it.
Yeah, they wasted a good Sully.
And Nate seems to kind of treat him like garbage, too.
Which is a no-no.
He's like, Sully, I don't want your jobs. Your jobs never pay off. He was like, yeah, but Nate, you're taking black market work. And I'm like, okay, I seriously doubt the jobs he's getting from Sully are on the up and up.
I mean, bless Sully, he tried to go legit, but, we all know how that went.
And apparently he's like a government contractor of some kind in this, but they never actually explain what he does. It's odd.
It's like they're throwing new characterization and plot points out, but they never explain it, and they're never mentioned again, and they're there, and that's it.
But yeah, and the thing with Sully about this is that there was in those emails, it was mentioned that because they offered Nathan Drake to a few actors. They offered it to Chris Pratt. He said no. And they were still toying with the idea of Mark Wahlberg, even though why you'd go with the nearly 50-year-old dude to start your franchise. It's like, okay.
Yeah, that wouldn't have gone over very well in the end.
But they offered him, like, there was discussions of offering him like a $15 million package if they really wanted him, but they did show him the script. And he did give them some notes. Apparently, maybe he was talking about an earlier revision or something, but he said he wanted it to be less of a buddy movie between Nate and Sully and to make it fully Drake's story or something like that. If it's talking about this draft, that doesn't make any sense because Sully's barely in it and it's very clearly the other guy's story.
Yeah, and if you're going at it like, no, Drake and Sully can't be buddy-buddy or adventure buddies or anything, then you kind of missed the point.
It basically was saying, I don't want to share screen time with another actor, I want to be clearly the lead.
Yeah.
That's what it sounded like.
It does, and that's why he's not a good pick for this.
Yeah, you sound like you're in physical pain from hearing that.
And we're less than 20 pages in.
Oh, of course. Was that you or the cat?
That was me.
Alright, so Nate just heads to Paris, where he meets with Roman and Navarro at Roman's estate, and they discuss his father's theory that they're descended from Sir Francis Drake, which Nate doesn't believe in, and he cites all the things about how, he had no children that on record, blah, 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 and stuff like that. And then Roman gets straight to the point. He wants the ring and is willing to pay millions for it. I think he says $40 million or something like that, which is ridiculous.
It was an insane amount, yeah.
And every time Nate even just slightly goes, "Are you sure?" Roman just keeps upping the price.
Because that's not desperate or anything.
No. At first, Nate says it's not for sale, but he then deduces that Roman is looking for El Dorado, the lost city of gold, which persuades Nate to play along, at least for now. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
It's like, if they start at 1 million, and then you go, are you serious? And they up it to 10 million instantly. If you're a treasure hunter, you should go, around that time you should go, wait a minute.
Yep.
Because that's an escalation. And going by the script, it took Drake a lot of time to arrive to the conclusion that, maybe there's something bigger here if they're that desperate for the ring.
Yeah, that's 5 pages of script right there.
Yeah, and it took him 5 pages to get to where I got in a 30-second explanation.
Oh, yeah.
Our hero, everyone.
Yeah, but then, turns out, there's a problem. Nate doesn't have the ring, and we go off on this fucking tangent.
It's a fetch quest after fetch quest. Oy.
Yeah, this is padded out so much, but he doesn't have the ring. As he tells Sully, he gave it to a gangster named Jose Cruz as collateral for a debt he owed him, and Nate has to go get it back. Cruz is located in Ciudad del Este, Paraguay, in the Triple Frontier, which is this notorious lawless area in South America on like the borders of 3 different countries, which is just, once again, it's like he's putting something he read in an article into this script for no reason other than because he can. You know, we gotta show like the real gritty crime-driven areas that Nathan Drake is gonna hang out in.
It's like this hard-on he has for these areas of criminal activity. It reminds me of a bit of Taken. Like, I think I read somewhere that someone approached Neeson and told him that because of the movie, they decided not to allow their child to travel to Europe because it's a horrible lawless state where people get kidnapped all the time. And it's like, that's not the point. And it's, I don't know, there are so many other places where this could take place, but he constantly goes to the crime-ridden hovels and favelas and just everything where there's crime and villainy. It's disturbing after a while.
Yeah, it just feels like he's going like I said, it feels like he read all these articles and books and stuff and went, I'm going to make this as contemporary as I possibly can.
And completely misses the point.
Yeah. And so he goes there and he pays a visit to Cruz, and he witnesses him force a man to boil his own hand as a punishment for lying to him, which is just a random bit of violence. Just to show that this guy really is evil. And then he refuses to hand over the ring even when Nate offers the money he owes him. And Nate goes to a bar where he orders a strange drink, which is a code phrase that gets him a special flash drive.
Which is, the sort of code phrases, I don't know, if it's that, if you get him some sort of flash drive with instructions on it or something, then a dead drop would be safer.
Yeah.
Than a passcode. This is like,
But instead he gets his bartender to tell him.
Yeah, because that's safe.
And this is where we begin to meet the script's version of Elena.
And they did Elena dirty.
Oh god,
Swear to fucking god.
It's so random with it. And they change her in such a way that I just want to say this now. You could almost cut her out of this and it wouldn't make that big of a difference.
Pretty much, yeah.
Because, I mean, really think about everything she does in this that really doesn't amount to anything.
No, she'll eventually be a tag-along.
At the very end. Okay, and so he spies her she's on her own in the bar, and she introduces herself as a freelance journalist. He says he's a consultant named Ian Riggins, but she points out he has a fresh bullet wound on his head, and he says, oh wait, I work as private security. And there's this whole thing where they're walking through like a market and looking at jewelry, and he points out the real thing and buys her a necklace, and they have this conversation about wanting what you can't have. And I want to say this now, in one of these emails, the guy who keeps, talking about this is so much better and more mature than National Treasure, talks about how great this romantic interest is compared to that movie, and talks about let me see, okay, I'm gonna have to pull this up and read exactly what he has to say about it, because him talking about the banter here is just ridiculous.
Especially because the banter is not that good.
Oh no, it's not. He calls it clever verbal sparring with Elena. It's not clever.
It's not clever, and if they're sparring, they're not doing it with any weapons. Because, it's not exactly a battle of wits here.
No, it's not. They repeat the same 3 fucking things to each other basically every time they meet. Wanting what you can't have, seeing things in black and white, and eventually, I'm not going to spoil it yet, but it just gets to a point where they start talking about the dumbest shit possible. And stop wasting time.
It's padding. More padding. Stupid padding.
Okay, here's the full quote. Here's the other quote I was thinking of. It's also worth noting that the Nate and Elena relationship is a lot sexier and more fun than the Nick Cage-Diane Kruger relationship in National Treasure. A lot more. 2 exclamation points. The romantic tension in National Treasure was pretty lame, and I'm like, you know what? The love story in National Treasure is not the greatest one ever written, but it's better than this.
Yeah, if that guy thinks that this is sexier, then I truly, truly feel sorry for his significant other. Because this is horrid.
It's like they watched one of those old, movies where you got, the verbal sparring in the love story like you would get in certain Hitchcock movies, but without the actual clever writing to back it up. It's just I'm going to say this, and I'm going to respond to that, and we're going to do the same back and forth every time we talk to one another.
It's paint by numbers. It doesn't feel organic in the least. It's like they're performing a program out.
Yes, I think it's funny that you say organic, because David Guggenheim is the brother of Mark Guggenheim, the Arrow writer who defended his crappy writing as him doing the organic thing.
Well, he can go jump up a pier then.
Most fans of that show would say so too.
Okay.
But, okay, where are we gonna go? Yeah, we have this whole thing, and I actually say this in my notes after a lengthy stretch of pseudo-flirtatious dialogue. That describes it pretty well, pseudo-flirtatious.
Yeah, I know humans have this thing where they can't pick out when people are flirting with them to save their lives, and this is actually a thing, like, overall of people. They did blind tests, and they couldn't understand when people are flirting with them. But, like, this is flirting if the two people are aliens and don't actually know what flirting is.
But they both are aware that they're flirting. It's just weird, silly dialogue.
It's lame. And still, the kicker here is that after all this stupidity, they end up banging.
Yeah, they end up banging, and she leaves before he wakes up, and she leaves the necklace and a note for him saying, for wanting things you can't have, and he goes, so that's what that feels like.
Yeah, I think, at this point, Elena probably wasn't charmed by the stupid almost flirting. I think she was just horny, and figured, well, here's a guy who can speak English. He's tolerable. Yeah, sure, what the hell.
I'm sorry, I gotta compose myself. This is too funny. Because it's really ridiculous when we find out what's actually going on.
It's so stupid.
So he figures, oh well, that happened. And so Nate, he plugs the flash drive into his laptop, which contains intelligence on Cruz's estate. And then he sneaks into the mansion dressed as one of the guards with a slight screw up on the color of the uniform. So he has to go to the laundry room and get the right one, which I got a good laugh out of. And that was pretty funny. I'll give it that. And he makes his way to the safe only to find the ring isn't in it. And he soon finds that Cruz has it around his neck. And there's this whole weird thing where he's like making out with a teenage girl.
It's a bit creepy.
Needlessly so.
More than creepy.
I mean, this script does not need to be going there for like 2-3 pages of its runtime. Like an Uncharted movie does not need to be going there.
Not really, no.
And so he cuts the power to try and get closer to him, but he gets spotted by a guard whom Cruz accidentally kills by shooting through the door. And then Nate rushes in and they're wrestling over the gun, and Cruz shoots himself and kills himself like a dumbass. And so Nate takes the ring, and but that's when a tactical police unit assaults the mansion. And Nate goes to make his escape, but he runs into Elena, who is revealed to be an undercover immigration and customs enforcement agent, ICE, which does not make this awkward at all in today's day and age.
Oh, not at all. And this is the absolute dumbest thing, because what is wrong with being a journalist? Like, she held her own in the games by being a journalist. What is wrong with being a journalist? Why did they have to change her into an ICE agent?
Because we gotta make this contemporary. We gotta put ICE in there. We gotta put the Triple Frontier, drug lords, TAM, all this other shit.
Yeah, because that was the most important thing in Uncharted.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be okay with getting rid of the gigantic TV camera thing, but I mean, have her go along. Like, I mean, you can do the journalist thing and make it not stupid is the thing I'm talking about. And the games generally did that.
They did. I mean, this is just, it's maddening because they did Elena dirty.
And basically this change to the character means that she is almost entirely off somewhere else while the actual important stuff is going on, trying to figure out what's going on, talking to tech people and all that. So she really isn't important to this plot at all. She's just there for the really crappy, flirty dialogue.
And the partial nudity, I guess, when they started banging.
Yeah, I don't even know why they're bothering with that when this is clearly not going to be an R-rated movie.
Well, I mean, they're shirtless Nate for the ladies, and Elena with, I don't know, her shirt off, bra on for the lad. Depends on who they were planning to play the part of Elena.
Well, I don't think they had no one was officially cast in any role in this, but I want to say there was like one email where like a couple of executives were like, how are you feeling Emma Stone as Elena? And the other one was like, yeah, maybe.
Oh, no.
Yeah, not this version, especially.
No, not this version.
Nobody should be forced to play this version.
True. Yikes.
But yeah, they have a bit of a shootout and they start exchanging more sarcastic remarks, and it's like, no, enough, not this dialogue. And Nate makes his escape when Elena gets jumped by one of Cruz's guards. And then we next see her I'm not even sure why I bothered, like, writing down the names of her superiors, because they all show up for, like, one scene at most. And they're all interchangeable. So yeah, she's getting chewed out by one of her superiors who orders her back to Washington. Because basically what they were doing is that they were watching this guy Cruz because he apparently smuggles stuff or does stuff for terrorists, and they were trying to get actionable intelligence so that they could get something from him and then move on to terrorists. And then Drake fucked that up by going in and killing him.
Oopsie daisy.
And it's like, you'd think this would have more repercussions, but they really don't seem to give a shit.
Again, it's a plot point that they bring in, but then it does nothing, it's barely mentioned again, and it's just there for the time being, and then we move on.
Yep, and so next we see Nate's on a plane, flying to Paris, and that sounded like snakes on a plane when I said that. He's playing with the ring a little bit. He thinks back to his father, telling him about constellations and how Francis Drake needed to use different stars to navigate, as he couldn't always see Polaris, and he says... he tells them that, you have to find your own North Star to guide you in life. Just this sappy thing, which you know is going to come back by the end.
Yeah, it is, but,
And also, way for him not to give a shit about his dead mother.
Yeah, you'd think he'd have some sort of memory about his mother, but nope, just daddy.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, that was just a lot of sappy character stuff they do with him here, which is just, ugh. And they barely even do it, so it's like, why?
I don't know, to Chekhov's gun this thing, somehow.
Yeah, but it only really... It literally is just referring to, like, things that's only in the scene description at the end. Like, it's not... It's... Whatever, I'm gonna drop this, so we have to move on.
We'll be here all day.
My vocabulary is failing me too, so... And so Nate and Sully, they take the ring to Roman's estate, where he and Navarro, they reveal the astrolabe to them, and this is where we find out that apparently the bits and pieces of this thing have been scattered everywhere. And so they place the ring in the one empty spot in the machine, and it opens up. And it's not like it's not like it's like using the astrolabe to reveal the coordinates. It just opens up, and there's coordinates scratched into it.
It seems like a lot of effort to waste on something that basically just turns out to read exactly where to go.
Yeah, it's a lot of effort considering they could just crack the thing open with a hammer.
Yeah, something. Take it apart, reassemble it, something.
Yeah, that's going to be a running theme in this script, is that everything is complicated. There's a bunch of different little steps they have to take.
Yeah, but it continues. The stupid continues.
Oh, it does. And so it's the coordinates of what they presume is El Dorado, and there's a latitude reading, and then there's numbers next to it which are not longitude. And Nate says, "Hey, it's dead reckoning because back then they didn't have longitude yet or any way of measuring it," which is actually true. And so he says it's measured from the home port, and he takes out a map and he points them to a place off the coast of Nicaragua. And then Roman's like, "Hey, you know too much." And so he has Nate and Sully knocked out and placed in a car as it sinks into a lake. So now we're adapting scenes from Heavy Rain of all things.
Whoopee.
David Cage as Gabriel Roman. I have to find El Dorado for the emotions.
Yeah, no, he's never gonna find them.
And so we do this thing. So Nate wakes up, he frees Sully and himself from the car, and they breathe air from the car tires until the guards watching the lake leave. And I'm like, okay, so you clearly saw that on like a Mythbusters episode or something.
Or MacGyver or something.
Yeah, like, I mean, this seems like he's read the worst case scenario survival handbook like way too many times.
But hey, it's a thing that happened.
But, yeah, they don't have a fight scene. They just wait for the guards to leave. And then they go to the train station, and Nate tells Sully that he lied, and that the coordinates really point to the Panamanian coastline instead, and they book tickets to Panama to go check it out. And also they specifically say that it's not far from the Panama Canal, which is going to lead to just this over-the-top bullshit in a minute.
Yes, it will.
So we cut back to Elena in Washington, D.C., and she proposes going after Cruz's killers to another one of her superiors, but he shuts the idea down because why go after the guy who fucked up your operation for you? And she goes to her friend who works at the tech side of ICE and has her pull up the surveillance footage learning that Cruz wasn't killed as a hit, and because she sees Nate take the ring. And then she also tells Elena that they ran his face through facial recognition software and hands her a military dossier, which goes over Nate's history, including 2 tours of duty with the Army Rangers in Iraq and Afghanistan. And he was linked to the theft of artifacts from the Iraqi National Museum, but was cleared of the charges when Sully, who's described as a defense contractor, covered for him. And so he disappeared from the record after that point, but Elena gets the idea to track Sully and find Nate that way. And this is all intercut with Nate and Sully gathering the gear and the fishing boat they need for their expedition. So yeah, that's the new backstory.
Yeah, presumably this is why he was able to yank out the part of the plane and just, bind the wound and walk for hours to get to his base of operations back in Indonesia. But there was no reason to make him a military-trained operator. I mean, Nate in the games is an effective treasure hunter without being military-trained.
And he's also not that great of a gunfighter if you really think about it, or maybe that's just my shitty playstyle. But it always seems like you get through the gunfights just purely based on luck.
Pretty much, yeah. And if he has any training, it's because Sully tried to teach him, but then got distracted by women and booze.
He went to follow the hose.
He followed the hose, yes.
But yeah, it's just like, he is basically just sort of like Indiana Jones, only he's even less prepared.
Pretty much, he's an accidental Indiana Jones.
So it's like, this
he
is
has
the
the
thing.
best luck and the worst luck ever.
Yeah, that's one thing. Hey, the one thing I noticed about this script, which is just probably the biggest thing about it, there is not a single scene of him going, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap.
Yeah, and this is a small thing, but it bugs me for some reason. His name is Nathan Corey Drake, as in K-O-R-Y. I don't understand why.
I forgot about the middle name.
I don't get it. I mean, they could have named him Nathan Francis Drake or something, because that would have been a nice callback. But no, it's Corey. Why Corey? Why?
It was the 80s?
Were his parents hippies? What's going on here?
I don't know. I mean, they believe that they're descended from Sir Francis Drake, so they're probably kooky.
Yeah, but I mean, if they were archaeologists, so you'd think they would pick some sort of a historical name. Corey. What, were they planning on making some sort of a Corey in the house thing? I don't know. And this has no bearing to anything that happens in a script. It just bugs me that his middle name is Corey, and that's it.
Why even give him a middle name?
Why even give him a middle name?
You could have named him Nathan Danger Drake for all the difference it would have made.
Pretty much, yeah.
All right, so let's get back. Let's get back to the plot.
The plot, if we must.
Well, at least get on something more relevant than middle names.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Okay, so they head out to... I misspelled sea here. Let me fix that in my notes. They head out to sea and they use some tech, like a fish finder or something, to check the bottom. And so they're talking about how El Dorado literally translates as the golden one, so they can't be looking for a literal city of gold. And also, according to this legend that they're talking about, the gold made men mad with a curse, and then the Incan king Huascar hid it away, and it talks about like a plague of cursed men, and you're giving away your plot twist already, movie.
Yeah, I mean, at least the first game had a build-up to it, and this one's just, hey, hello, guess what we're gonna have?
Yep, and that's one of the best moments of that first game, when suddenly it's like, oh shit, there's zombies.
Yeah, it's like, suddenly there's weird shrieking and groaning and something slipping by on the doorway, and you're just like, oh shit.
And it just turns into a horror game for like an hour after that, and I'm like, okay, this was a surprising twist, I like this.
Yeah, but in here they're just like, here it is. Ta-da. Enjoy. You know what's coming.
And spoilers, they barely do anything with it anyway, so what's the point?
There was no point. They're trying to hit the road markers on the Uncharted one. It had the zombie thing, so we must have the zombie thing.
And unfortunately, they delayed this movie so long that the Tomb Raider movie came out and ripped that twist off. God, I was just going, what? When I watched that in the theater.
Yeah, I mean, and I still feel that Tomb Raider probably did it better than this movie.
Oh, definitely did better than this script, because this script does even less with that concept.
Yeah, it's just, oh boy. This whole thing is a mess.
Okay, and so, Elena calls Sully's satellite phone and talks to Nate, and They have the same fucking banter that they have in every other scene together, and she uses this to trace the call and find him, and he apparently can't just hang up. He has to keep talking to this woman he barely knows.
I think he's thinking with his dick with this one.
Yeah,
like, if he can just charm her enough, maybe she'll go for a second round.
You see, I'm the real head here, see?
Yeah. Also, I should mention that there was something that they're going to try and set up, which would be the main rant of mine that's going to come eventually.
Oh, they talk about Queen Elizabeth in this scene?
Yeah. Drake goes, he was Queen Elizabeth's greatest explorer, referencing to Sir Francis Drake, and she cared deeply for him even though he was of a lower class. Now, everyone, remember, Auntie Epic is going to come back to this when it's time.
Yes, Professor Epic is going to have a lecture about it later. Be sure to take notes.
Will. Yes, there will be a test later. But anyway, stupid, almost flirting, cold tracing.
She cared more about him than she did about Walter Raleigh, considering she cut his head off.
Oh, well, yeah.
But okay, back to so they pull up a coffin emblazed with the crest of Sir Francis Drake, and this is actually somewhat based on truth in that he was buried at sea off the coast of Panama, and they still haven't found his coffin.
Yeah, it was in Portobello Bay in Panama, which I'm not sure how close it is to where they are right now, but yeah, he was allegedly buried in the sea in a lead-lined coffin, and it's supposed to be somewhere there between two scuttled ships, but no one's found it thus far, so we're not sure.
Also, I should point out, we're 60 pages into this thing. We're at the very beginning of the game.
Yeah, so yeah, now you all understand why I'm groaning in pain over here.
Yes, it's let me get back to it. And it's empty. Nothing but wet sand inside, but, Nate pops out, the panel on the inside of the lid, and it's got this picture with a ship on it, and Nate's like, you know what? This picture must be a coded map. And I'm like, really?
Why would you think that? Why would that be your go-to answer to this?
Because he knows everything.
It's like, he's supposed to be the smart guy, but this is basically hearing hoofbeats and thinking zebras.
Yeah. And the other thing is that in the game, it's simple. You open the coffin, you find a journal, and that leads you to the next location. We can't do that here because Sir Francis Drake's journal is in Roman's collection here, so instead we have this complicated crap with a coded map and blah-de-blah-de-blah.
Although I think they did it this way so they can steal something very important that we get to later.
Oh, yes, that. And yeah,
this is the setup for it.
Yeah, not to lie. Spoilers, they spend the next 30 pages of this script trying to get the thing they need to read the map.
So, well-timed, well-paced, all that sort of thing.
She's being sarcastic if you can't tell. And so they take pictures of it and they send it to a codebreaker friend of Sully's when they get attacked by a group of mercenaries working for Roman, leading to a boat chase in the Panama Canal.
Yeah, because they're really lackadaisical about that sort of thing over there.
And we even get like a Last Crusade moment where they go in between the lock that's closing, and one of the boats, a bad guy boats, crashes into it, goes boom.
Yeah, and I'm sure none of the Coast Guard care at all. Of course the Panama police do show up, but it's like, this is a bit understated for the emergency that it is.
And also they lose the map panel and the bad guys get it.
So, well done, mate.
Yeah, and so, they're at an internet cafe in Panama City, because those are still a thing in 2014, I guess?
Apparently.
And Nate's studying the pictures of the panel, and he notices that the cross on the ship's flag, it's not the cross from the English flag, it's something else, and Sully's contact calls, and he says that they need a key to decipher it, and then Nate figures it out, because he's flipping through a bunch of random pictures, and he comes across a painting of Queen Elizabeth with her scepter in her hand, and it's got a diamond on top of it, and he goes, what? That must be the key, because it looks just like the cross on the ship's flag.
Yeah, and some of you may have figured out already where this is going with the scepter, but we'll confirm it in just a bit. Hold on. And
he goes, he pulls up a web page and goes, hey, Sully, we're going to London, because this thing is kept in the Tower of London with the crown jewels. This is and for all that talk about this being, our superior version of National Treasure, this is just stealing the Declaration of Independence all over again, but nowhere near as cool as that heist sequence was.
and this is a bit more country hopping, I think.
Yeah, it's sort of like the Buckingham Palace stuff in National Treasure 2, but not really.
No, just me, senpai.
Oh, they sick the bobbies on us. Okay.
Anyway, here's one thing, Kirst. Eventually, Elena kind of tracks them down to the cafe, I think.
Yeah, they just barely get away from her.
Yeah, and on the table is the necklace that Drake bought her in Paraguay. Ooh.
I'm like, dude, stop leaving hints.
This is not flirting, people. This is stupid.
Also, it cuts to Roman's estate where he kills the lead mercenary, who, by the way, is an actual legitimate character in the first game. Like, the guy who's leading the pirates and stuff, he's an actual character in the game who sticks around for a while. It's actually kind of interesting. Here, he's literally just gold-toothed mercenary who gets shot for no reason.
And that's it. We barely knew him.
And then Navarro's like, oh, hey, I figured out we needed the scepter as well, so apparently he just happened to look at that picture.
Ass-pull is ass-pull, but hey, we need to keep the movie going.
Yeah, what a coinkydink.
Indeed, what a coinkydink.
And so we get cut to London, and Nate and Sully are approaching the tower when they learned it was assaulted and robbed by armed men. So all that crap they went through with that Louvre heist, and like that shit was clearly planned out. Roman just went, nah, let's go in guns blazing this time.
Yeah, it's his turn to call the idiot Bob, I guess. Someone else is holding the communal brain cell.
Yep. And so Nate approaches an old contact named Dr. Blair Upton, who is a canon forwarder who is in this for literally a scene.
Yeah, I think she's there to be, well, cheesecake, because she's described as smart, sexy, and sophisticated, and in a no-nonsense but well-fitted business suit. I'm assuming Nate's left with her at some point, but right now she's there to be cheesecake.
And it says he sold her a stolen artifact or something.
Or something, yeah.
But no, she's literally just here for be a plot device. Yeah.
So frustrating.
Yeah, and when he's talking to her, he lets slip that he knows it was the scepter that was taken, and she obviously thinks that it was him, and so she goes to alert the police, but he slips away. And this is when he deduces that the stolen scepter was actually a fake on display, because it's not uncommon for museums to have the fakes on display and the real ones in the vault.
And there's the plot point I mentioned earlier, by accident.
Yeah, you predicted that, and you forgot about it.
Yeah, but, I don't know, it seems that the scepter of Queen Elizabeth I would be a thing that the UK wouldn't want to part of. Just saying.
Yeah, and so he somehow figures out, oh, the real one must be buried with her at Westminster Abbey, and so they just need to find a way to get in. And for some reason, Roman is now based on a rusty cargo ship, and Navarro is examining the map panel with the stolen scepter, and it's not, revealing anything when he looks through the diamond, and so he's like, it's a fake, and just smashes it.
Like a true toddler.
And Roman freaks out even more, and they have this weird, odd couple relationship where Navarro's the calm, collected one, and Roman's, screaming, which he was never like before these last couple scenes.
Yeah, it's like the dynamic between the two has been flipped. Now Navarro is somehow the calm, collected, smart guy, and meanwhile, at the beginning of the script, Roman is the one who planned the Ocean's 11 heist at the museum, assumedly. So it's like maybe they accidentally mislabeled the guys.
Yeah,
in the script.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure it works. And so Elena arrives in London because MI5 because when Upton alerted the police to Drake's presence, apparently the word got out about him to all the intelligence agencies, and so now Elena's there, and she talks with this high up guy named Harry Craig, which I don't know why I wrote his name down because he dies in 10 pages.
I mean, it could be a reference to Uncharted 2 with the British guy that Nate breaks into the museum and then he backstabs Drake.
Yeah, could be. But they get word of a bomb threat at Westminster Abbey, which is, of course, it's a fake set up by Nate and Sully to empty the building. And then Nate uses the opportunity to break into Elizabeth's tomb. And Sully gets spotted in the crowd by Elena and gets arrested. And so Nate finds a scepter in Elizabeth's sarcophagus, but Elena shows up, holds him at gunpoint. And despite Nate's best efforts at persuading her, she takes him out of there and cuffs him to the inside of an armored police van. And Sully is locked in the back of a nearby police car. So, oh no, the heroes have been arrested. What will we do?
Whatever shall we do? We will do stupid shit.
And so we get a masked Roman and a few of his men. They attack the police convoy and they literally ram into the van and flip it over. And I'm like, someone here was clearly trying to do like the Dark Knight convoy scene.
But it's edgy and dark and gritty and realistic.
Yep. And so, Roman, he retrieves the scepter and he shoots Craig dead. And then they snatch Nate and Elena, who at Nate's suggestion, she ditched her gun and her ID to pose as another prisoner, which, smart move, but literally all it does is mean she gets to come along for this next part.
Yeah, I mean, that's how little she does in the script. She's only along for the ride because she got kidnapped.
And so, and Roman also apparently shoots Sully dead in the street there. And so bye Sully.
Bye Sully.
And so Nate comes to on Roman's cargo ship, where he's forced to decode the map to keep Roman from killing Elena. And he tries viewing the map through the diamond, but then he realizes that the directions that's giving that way is a misdirect. And so the light needs to refract through the diamond, which then projects the real map onto the wall. And this is just, Can't the map just be a map that you have to decode, like, the locations on? Does it have to be a fucking picture that you need to refract light through a diamond to read it? This is just National Treasure, only worse.
And this is like, they wanted to do the Indiana Jones light scepter thing, and they fucked it up.
Yeah, it's totally the Staff of Ra.
Yeah, and this is probably the only reason they decided to do it with the scepter. So they could crib from Indiana Jones.
Yeah, and what's really funny about all this stuff is that they talked so much shit about National Treasure in those emails when literally the previous writers they had brought on worked on those movies.
And this is like National Treasure light or something.
And the Indiana Jones thing is even funnier because one of the things they talk about in emails is that they wanted for tone to go more Bourne than Indy. But the thing is that Jason Bourne movies are way more lively than this.
Yeah, they're at least entertaining. This has been just stupid all the way down so far.
Well, they were entertaining up to a point, but let's not talk about the one with Alicia Vikander, shall we?
Yeah.
We've talked about her enough when we talked about Tomb Raider. And so it refracts on the wall. It projects the map on the wall, which reveals a temple along the Rio de Espiritu in the Amazon basin as the destination. And so they head to an airfield to catch a plane to Brazil. And so when they're getting on the plane, that Nate first gets a look at Navarro's usually concealed forearms, which are covered in tattoos, revealing him to be the man who killed his parents. And Navarro realizes that he knows as well, but they don't get a chance to do anything about it. And I saw that plot twist coming from way fucking back.
Everyone saw it coming from way fucking back.
Blind people saw it coming from way fucking back.
Yeah, it's like they're just going by the motions. They're hitting the certain plot point that most of these sort of movies have.
Yeah, and also it's about this time we are 90 pages into the 124-page script. There is no island in this. The island from the game does not exist. We're just going to go straight to a temple in the Amazon, and that's it.
Yeah. Though, if you pardon me for a minute, I need to put another pin in about the giant rant that's coming up.
Oh, that came up again? I must have missed it.
Yeah, page 88, actually. So, it's when they find out the Rio de Espiritu and the temple, and on the bottom of the map there's an inscription, Dearest Bess. And yes, one of the nicknames referred to Elizabeth I would be the good Queen Bess. But the script makes it sound like this is a cutesy nickname that Francis Drake himself referred to her, and not like an overall nickname by the people. And here's where we start getting into the weird territory. See?
Yes.
He writes that our numbers dwindle as the enemy closes in. Only the thought of our reunion keeps me going. Let the stars guide you to me. Pass through the underworld and bathe in gold. First off, that a bit familiar of someone of his station to address the bloody queen. But let's pin that for now, because I'm coming back to it.
Yeah. And they don't really go anywhere with what you're implying there, which makes it even weirder.
Yeah. This is a stupid plot point, but it's the one that makes me rage the worst. But let's move on, shall we?
Also, River of Sacred Spirits sounds a little bit like the Plagues of the Silent Spirits. Is this the South American Silent Hill by any chance?
Maybe.
But the pass through the underworld and bathe in gold, I'm glad you mentioned that because that's actually important.
Yeah.
Again, I think I forgot to take that down as a note, so thank you, actually.
Yay,
Your rant serves a purpose. Okay, they fly over the Amazon in helicopters, and Navarro uses some special technology to locate the temple underneath the jungle canopy, which I will say this is one use of, like, current day tech that I like in this, because obviously, like, the temple wouldn't just be visible from the sky. Like, if it's in the middle of the jungle like that, and it's been abandoned for so long, it would have been grown over.
Yeah, so, I don't know, kudos to them. One of the few things they did right. Woohoo!
Yeah, we're back to Clock Tower, like, damning with faint praise.
Yeah.
They all have to, wait, where was I going to say? They all have to jump out on cables because they can't land the helicopters. And that's when Nate and Elena make their escape, taking out the men in their helicopter. And Nate actually starts it by putting one of the cables around the guy's neck and hanging him from the helicopter. And I'm like, you motherfucker, you were watching Scarface when you wrote this.
Probably, yeah.
And they jump into the river as the helicopter crashes, and Romano says to crash, but Navarro's like, nah, we don't need them anymore, let's just keep going.
Then, let's see, there's some talk about the fauna, howler monkeys, dart frogs, all those sort of things, because we're in South America. We're in the Amazon.
And Nate, he tells Elena, we're gonna head for this sinkhole that I spotted from the air. And apparently, according to legend, the sinkholes are like the entrance to the underworld, so that's going to be the way he's going to enter the temple or something like that. And
I think so. I think, I know there are sort of like water pools that are said to be entrances to Xibalba, I think was the name of I think it was the Mayan underworld.
Yeah, Xibalba's the Mayan underworld.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember which was the Incan underworld, but then I'm not good with South American mythology to begin with.
Neither am I.
Anyway, yeah, so, I mean, there's truth in this. There are sinkholes and the likes that are said to go all the way to the underworld, but I think there needed to be the element of water in there to correctly go to the underworld. I'm not sure if that applies to sinkholes as well.
Well, there is water down there when they get there, so...
Yeah, I suppose. But I mean, it's still a bit of a...
And they have to swim underwater.
Yeah, well, I'm still not giving them a point for this one.
I award them no points. May God have mercy on their soul. But they have a brief run-in with the local natives, and there's this whole thing in the scene descriptions about how it's this specific tribe that's never been contacted, and I'm like, this guy has been reading National Geographic again. Stop him.
Yeah, I mean, there are tribes that haven't actually been contacted by modern man, but at the same time, I wouldn't say that this place would be, because, I mean, they were contacted a couple of 100 years ago.
Yeah, and they're not that far from the Amazon River.
So it's like, the Amazon River is a trade route, as far as I know. Like, people use it to get to places because it's an easier travel than through the jungle. So, I wouldn't say that they've never been contacted. They're too close to the Amazon River to remain hidden.
And when we say close, I mean they are literally like a 5-minute helicopter flight, if that, away from it, as we find out at the end.
Yeah, so let's continue.
Yes, we have to continue. But yeah, the natives, it forces them to flee into the jungle, where they find a stranded 1960s-era Soviet submarine, because we're now doing the submarine thing from the game. Only instead Nazis, it's Russians.
Yeah, slow clap to you idiots.
I could have done without the submarine, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it fits in the game, but not here. This is too different, and it's just sort of a weird thing they threw in to appeal to the fans, I guess.
And it gives them some exposition in a bit.
Yeah, but it's still, they could have done it better.
And so, meanwhile, Roman and his men, they've found the temple, but there's no doors on it, and so he orders them to punch a hole in the side when they can't find the entrance, and Navarro's like, no, don't do that, we have to find the entrance, and Roman's just like, no, we can't wait, and I'm like, you stole this scene from the first Tomb Raider movie, goddammit.
Yeah, they did.
And so Nate and Elena, they're exploring the submarine, and they eventually find the corpse of the captain dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. And they also find a satchel full of golden artifacts, as well as a sealed door, behind which are the dead bodies of most of the crew who look like they were trying to get out. And while all this is going on, Roman's men, they blow open the temple and wander around in an underground labyrinth. And then Nate and Elena, they find out in the submarine, and they split up to go exploring this thing. And there's actually a bit where they're bantering over the radio, and they start arguing over whether or not Nate drools in his sleep. Sexy banter, everybody!
Yes, very sexy.
And so they find out that the submarine had been sent there to study a microbe that had arrived at that area in a meteorite 1,000 years ago. They deduced that the meteorite must be hidden in the temple, and they determined to keep Roman from getting it. And how the fuck did these Russian people know that there was a fucking microbe in the meteorite inside a statue in the middle of the jungle?
Yeah, there's nothing that would say how or why they knew. There's no mention of any diaries or recollections or myths or anything. They just decided to send a submarine to Amazon from Russia on a hunch.
And somehow they got up the Amazon without being noticed.
Yeah, somehow. I mean, it's not exactly deep enough for a goddamn submarine to go through.
Well, I mean, unless it's the Nautilus from League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which can go up the canals of Venice, for God's sake.
Let's not talk about that one.
And also, you're giving away the fact that there's something inside that statue before we even see it.
I mean, they kind of gave it away earlier.
Yeah, but you're giving away the twist of what's actually in there early, and they changed it from a corpse to a meteorite because... Huh?
I don't know, I guess meteorite is simpler than an effect. I guess, I don't know, maybe they didn't have a desiccated corpse lying around that they could use, so they decided to go with a hunk of rock.
Yeah, they could just point those up at the local quarry.
Yeah.
But, okay, they head for the sinkhole, and Nate realizing that they might be able to reach El Dorado first by going that way, and they climb down in there. They swim underwater, emerging in a subterranean chamber with El Dorado, a giant golden statue submerged chest high in water. And there's like a projection of rock that meets out at like its chest, and there's like these weird carvings on it that Elena's looking at. And then Nate enters an adjoining chamber, and he finds the corpses of Francis Drake and his men, along with a last will from Drake saying he intends to stay and protect mankind from the evil within El Dorado. And he says, "My only regret is that I never got to see my newborn son."
And here is where I stage a coup.
Yes, here is, you're going to take
over.
Yeah, you're going to take over, give your little history lecture. I'm going to sit back and relax.
Yeah, so here's the problem. Sir Francis Drake never had an issue. He was married twice, first to a Mary Newman, and it was until her death in 1581. And then his second wife was Elizabeth Sydenham, I think that pronounced, and they were married until his death in 1596. No issue. And here's the problem that makes me rage the worst. Because technically you could say that the Dear Best letters could be to his second wife, Elizabeth Sydenham, because Elizabeth. However, never once in the script did they mention that Sir Francis Drake had ever been married, no, much less twice. So, the implication here is that the Dear Best letters were all for Queen Elizabeth I, also called the Virgin Queen, which, whether or not she actually was, I don't know. Someone smarter than me can go find it out, or speculate on it, go at it. But the problem here is that the implication is that they had a tryst, and she got pregnant, and gave birth to a son, which means there would be a royal bastard of the Virgin Queen, and if Nathan's father was right, then he would be the direct descendant of Sir Francis Drake and Queen Elizabeth I. And this is so stupid on so many fucking levels. Nonetheless, with the fact that arguably Queen Elizabeth's love of her life would have been Sir Robert Dudley, that she never actually got married to. But the problem here is that there's just no way the child would have survived in the court. And if it would have been had to, I don't know, get spirited away somewhere, to be adopted, raised somewhere else. And there would be no reason to call it Drake. There would be no reason to give it the last name Drake. And again, there was no issue anywhere. He had no descendants, and, I mean, yes, this movie script came out before the Uncharted 4 game, so yeah, I get it. In there, they simply portrayed as a spiritual successor to Sir Francis Drake. But in this, they are actually claiming blood relation to Sir Francis Drake through Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen. I can't stress enough how stupid this plot point is.
Okay, I have to jump in and say, I get what you're saying here, but the implication is incredibly vague on the page. They never outright say that.
They don't know, but the letter is addressed to Diabes, and it is very vague, I give you that. But the problem is that if we're working with the script, they never mention he was married to anyone else, they never mention anything else, and they imply that the Bess was an affectionate nickname that Francis used with the Queen, instead of like the nickname given to her by the people. And the implication are that they had some sort of a relationship outside of Queen and her subject, that it may have been romantic in tone, and it just, the script never goes anywhere with it. It doesn't disabuse us of that notion. The implication is there, however vague, and it's stupid.
Yes.
Like, they could have mentioned the second wife. She would have had an easier time hiding the child as a servant, for example, or a relative's child. She did remarry and had no issue with her husband, second husband, I think. So she could have hidden the child better. It still would have been a blood relation to Sir Francis Drake. But they don't mention that he was married. So the vague implication is that he had a child with the Queen.
And I think that covers that.
Yes, it's stupid, and I could go on, but it's just a repeat of everything I've just said.
Okay, can I mention my problem with this scene?
Go ahead.
Drake finds out, oh, my father might have been right about his crazy theory, and I might be descended from this guy right here. And he doesn't really seem to give much of a shit. It's just kind of like, that happened. They tried. Bless their hearts, they tried. In fact,
they fucked it up.
In fact, in one of the emails, there's another executive who says something to the effect of, as it stands, this reveal is just kind of there, it's not really emotional. And he's kind of right.
He's kind of right, and I hate that I'm agreeing with them.
Let me see if I can pull up the full quote. Here it is. Oh, by the way, you know what they described this is how they describe I'll save that for the end, but he says, Drake needs to have more aching questions about his past and where his family comes from, so that this discovery that he's related to Francis Drake has personal meaning for him. Right now, it's a surprise, but it doesn't feel emotional.
I mean, yeah, he's right. It's just sort of there. It's stupid.
But at least if it had some sort of emotional impact, it would have meant something.
Yeah, but it has no weight. It's like, never once has Nathan in the script mentioned anything about being curious about his family's past. He just mentions that his father had a crazy theory at some point, and that's about it.
Yeah.
But he hasn't made any investigation into his family tree. There's nothing.
No, that's literally it.
Yeah. Daddy had a theory. Theory may have been right. Here's my ancestor, and nothing.
Alright, so, moving off the plot?
Yeah.
Wait. I have one more thing to say about that. In this script, he does not give a shit about that theory. Whereas in the games, yeah, you find out that the whole Drake thing was bullshit he made up to make him feel better about himself, basically. But he does seem to have a legitimate sort of regard for Francis Drake, whereas here he just doesn't care.
Yeah, like I said, in 4, which, yes, I know it came out 2 years after the script, but in 4, they do say that it is a sort of a spiritual succession or a feeling of kinship towards Sir Francis Drake, and that's why he's Drake. But, like, even in the games, when it turned out to be bullshit, which we all kind of knew to be bullshit because, again, he had no heir, it still was handled better than here.
Okay, and so, this is when Roman's men, they blow through the last barrier and into the statue chamber, and they rappel down. And so Nate and Elena, they sneak around to attempt to stop them, but they get caught really easily.
Well done, guys.
Alright, and so Navarro fiddles with the carvings on the statue, first draining the lake, and then after producing an ornate ceremonial mask and putting it on, he opens the front of it, which releases the microbe and infects Roman and most of his men, apart from a few loyal to Navarro who don gas masks. And so he goes off on this whole thing about how he's going to reclaim, his people's rightful place in the world and blah blah blah. So he's a total megalomaniac. Out of nowhere.
Yeah, completely not out of nowhere.
And in the game, he just wanted to sell it because he's the one who understands what the actual value of this is. And so he goes, hey, I can sell this to people who would want a germ weapon.
Yeah, still handled better than here. There's just, I mean, the only place where they started hinting at that maybe he has something else planned is at the temple, when he's going like, no, you can't blow it open. And that's it. That's the only place where they mention something about him suddenly caring about this.
Yeah, like, I mean, at the beginning, he mentions that he's okay with stealing the vase because, oh, these museums have stolen, enough of my culture, I'm going to steal some of it back. That's literally it.
Yeah, and suddenly he cares beyond the monetary value. Like, this came out of nowhere. Suddenly nuts.
Yes, Nate and Elena, they jump in the water and swim away. Swim away! Well, Navarro, he monologues to the slowly zombifying Roman about his plans to upset the balance of power, blah, blah, blah. And then he has his men blow the roof off the chamber and has the statue carried off in a cargo net attached to, I believe they specify it's a Chinook helicopter. And so
I think so, yeah.
Nate and Elena emerge in the sinkhole and begin climbing the vines out of there when they are attacked by Roman, now in full rage zombie mode. And oh dear God, this part where they're hanging from the vines, it's like Nate pulls out the shotgun and aims it at Roman, and they're like, this is an iconic pose for the character, guys, and he pulls the trigger and nothing happens. And I'm like, fuck you.
So much anger.
Because, the gun's been soaked. But apparently, he does something where he, swings around on the vine, and that shakes the rest of the water out of it, and then he blows off zombie Roman's head with a shotgun.
I mean, I'm not an expert on shotguns, but I don't think that's how that works. But okay, fine. We're almost at the end.
Yeah, we're not doctors.
Yeah, what do we know?
But, okay, and they see the helicopter taking off, but Nate's the only one who's able to grab onto the netting before it gets out of reach. And he climbs the netting towards the helicopter, and Elena helps by shooting some of Navarro's men from the ground, which is the most useful thing she does in this entire script. But then she gets attacked by the infected zombie mercenary guys, and is saved at the last minute by those natives we met earlier. Also, I have to mention the ornate ceremonial fucking mask that's also a gas mask. What the fuck is that?
I don't know. He was extraordinarily proud of his arts and crafts project and decided to put it on a gas mask. I don't know.
So Nate and Navarro, they fight on the netting, and Nate manages to pull the cargo release lever, and they fall into the Amazon River along with the statue, and I'm going to have to check for a line here, because I remember it being ridiculous. Hold on, let me get to it.
I think page 117.
Oh, let me get there. Oh god, it's even worse than I remembered it. He says, "You cannot stop these. I will reclaim my people's rightful place. It is our fate." And then, yeah, this is while they're over the river. He says, "Your fate was sealed when you killed my parents." Wow, that's not a good one-liner.
It's really bad. But wait, it gets worse.
But they plummet into the Amazon River, and they're struggling in the net, and Drake yanks the ring away from him, and then he swims away, and then El Dorado drags Navarro into the water and crushes his skull on the river bottom. And then Drake bursts up out... Okay, I'm just going to read this. Exterior Amazon River, moments later. Drake bursts out of the water, signet ring in hand. A beat as he treads water, his body completely drained. New angle. Elena, arriving at the river's edge, having seen what's happened. Drake turns to her. They lock eyes. So, that happened.
Yeah, that about sums up the entire fucking script.
Yeah, that's the perfect... That's the microcosm of this script. And so, basically, on page 118, it's over, but we have 6 more pages, which I covered in a single paragraph.
Yes.
And so we see Elena, she's reporting to her superiors at the U.S. consulate, and I can't pronounce Portuguese to save my life, so I'm just going to say Sao Paulo, where she covers for Nate in her report, and it's here we learn that Sully is still alive, but under guard in a London hospital. We're not surprised at all.
No, not really.
And so Elena meets with Nate, telling him that she's putting a team together to secure the statue, because Leia, we can't leave this thing lying there. Let's trust the government with it, why don't we?
I mean, obviously.
And he says he's leaving all the treasure behind. And then we get a series of scenes, including Nate helping Sully escape from the hospital. Apparently he can escape from being under guard by MI5 just by with a bedsheet ladder.
Because it's not like they're professionals or anything.
And Elena heads back to the temple only to find that Nate snatched all of the gold after all. And Elena and her team retrieve the statue, presumably to put it in Area 51 right next to the Ark of the Covenant. And while Nate and Sully, as per a quote from Francis Drake's last letter, head off into the sunset in search of further adventures, and the quote is, Let me find it. I can only hope that my son carries on with my legacy to journey into the unknown for the greater good and never be afraid to believe. So Francis Drake is also Parappa the Rapper.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Oh god, this dumbest fucking callback. Here, in the chamber, a letter focuses on Sir Francis Drake's skeleton and a rock at his feet, and underneath it, flapping in the wind, a torn piece of paper, left behind like a Dear John letter. And you know what's coming. She looks at it, there's a note written on one side in Nathan Drake's handwriting. The things you want but can't have.
Oh
This
boy.
fucking script.
It's that shitty dialogue has to make one last appearance.
One more death rattle.
So yeah, we didn't like it, can you tell?
No, we didn't. How is it that I always pick the dumbest fucking scripts? I just... There's so much to be done with Uncharted, and they did this. This is what they came up with. After all the revisions and other people writing, and this is the end product.
Well, it wasn't quite the end product, but
Oh dear God.
by the way, I have to pull up this quote. Wait, they were describing the overall project. He describes the Uncharted movie as a really fun summer adventure film like the Lara Croft movies, parentheses, with a little bit of Dan Brown thrown in.
Oh, fuck off. This is pain. Honestly, I feel like I should print this out and set it on fire again.
You want to burn every single script I send you, don't you?
I mean, a bit, yeah. I kinda do.
So, yeah, the script, not good. It's just bland, trying to be one of those dime a dozen gritty modern thrillers that you can find in like a bargain bin somewhere.
It's a Frankenstein's monster of other scripts cobbled into this. It steals from Indiana Jones, it steals from Lara Croft, it steals from Uncharted, it steals from so many places, and the end result is a mess.
Yeah, it is a pretty big mess. Now, the way this went eventually was that later that year they hired Mark Bowall to write the film, who was known for writing The Hurt Locker, so probably would have taken it even further in the kind of gritty direction.
I don't know, I think that's the exact wrong kind of direction to go with Uncharted. I mean, it's not exactly chuckle every 5 minutes sort of thing, but it's not really the sort of thing you go into in the sort of grimdark area.
Yeah.
Like, there are things in it that get dark, but it's not dark constantly with only misery and hopelessness, and that's not Uncharted. With Uncharted, there's supposed to be a joy of discovery or investigation or historical aspect, just something that people are curious about. There's none of it here.
And so this kept going, and eventually in 2015, Seth Gordon, who was supposed to direct, left the project over creative differences, and then it just sort of went into limbo for like a year.
And now we hear more rap.
Yeah, we keep going further, and in 2016, Joe Carnahan, who's best known for writing and directing The Grey, which is a really good survival thriller, he gets brought on to write a draft, and he finishes it sometime in he finishes in January 2017, and then they bring in Sean Levy gets brought on to direct, who's best known for Night at the Museum, and this starts getting kicked around, and I'm guessing the script got thrown out when Tom Rothman, who had taken over at Sony, he saw the early footage from Spider-Man: Homecoming and said, I want another franchise with this Tom Holland kid, and said, okay, we're now going to do Uncharted with a young Nathan Drake when he first meets Sully and blah, blah, blah. And that version is basically what they're still supposedly making, but it's changed directors at least once.
In which, I mean, I have no problem with Tom Holland as an actor. I think he's very good at what he does. He's talented, but he looks like he's 16.
And he probably will for a long...
20.
He's 23.
Yeah, he's 23 and it looks like he's barely 16. So, it's not like young Nate, yeah, okay, maybe, probably. He probably could play the young Nathan Drake, but we're not interested that much in the young Nathan Drake. We're interested in Nathan Drake adventures during his adulthood, the prime of his treasure hunting career.
Yeah, I mean, who really wants to see the child version, I mean, for a whole movie? I get what they're thinking. They want the young guys so that they can keep this franchise going for 10 years.
Yeah, but I mean, the problem is, I mean, you probably know already, but there's like a young MacGyver series, and I don't think that did very well.
I don't watch it, but apparently it got a second season, but it's not doing well.
Yeah, and then there was, I don't know if it actually became reality, but I heard something about a TV show about young Indiana Jones.
That really did.
A movie.
That happened in the early 90s.
And I'm guessing it didn't do well.
It got 2 seasons. It wasn't bad what I saw of it.
Yeah, but I mean, we have an established character, and trying to force the young version of the character to be the established character seems like a bit like missing the point. I get what they're going for, but it still feels like they're doing it wrong.
Yes.
And again, no problem with Tom Holland. He could probably pull it off, but not like as an adult Nathan Drake, because he's gonna look young for a long time.
Yeah, not the one we necessarily want to see.
Yeah. I mean, if they need to film some sort of flashback, then yeah, there's your guy. But they should probably look into someone older, or someone who at least looks older.
But yeah, who even knows if they're gonna make that, because it's set for like 2020, and it hasn't gone anywhere since then. So
yeah, it's probably not gonna happen in the near future.
My guess is it's gonna get scrapped along with every other version of Uncharted that they've tried to do.
So yeah, as far as we know, the Uncharted movie is permanently in limbo.
Because it's unfortunately owned by Sony, who tend to suck.
Yeah, pretty much.
But yeah, I think that sums it up pretty well, so I think we can call it here.
Yeah, we can, because all I have left is more anger and rage at the dumbest fucking implication of bloodlines. Fuck me!
You can print it out and burn it if you must.
I'm so tempted to. I just...
or just draw more pictures of yourself burning it.
Oh, I really need to. I need to purge this thing somehow.
Maybe that should be the thumbnail for this episode.
Yeah, probably.
Every episode, just every episode you're in.
Yeah, probably. I can't. Honestly, again, just like with the clock tower, it feels like they're sort of circling in the right area, but they keep missing the right house.
Yeah, but they got slightly closer than Clock Tower did.
I mean, yeah, good on them. You get a cookie, but
you win nothing. Good day, sir.
Yeah, it's not enough. It's not nearly enough. Again, we're damning by faint praise.
Oh,
they got it
for sure.
closer than Clock Tower, but then Clock Tower was a fucking mess. So it's like, it's how do you go below 0?
You don't. Those numbers don't exist.
Yeah, it's like, somehow you still didn't make it to the actual number. You're still in the imaginative numbers.
All right, so I think we can leave it at that.
Yeah, like I said, if I could drink, I'd be drunk.
My personality's not enough to get drunk off of, I guess. So, but
have to say no.
But yeah, that was Uncharted in all its dubious glory. Hope you enjoyed the episode, guys. Remember all those plugs from the beginning, because I don't feel like repeating them right now. And until next time, bye.
Goodbye.